Hey everybody, welcome back to Matt Kiteboarding's Wing Wednesdays. I'm Tucker, and today we're going to talk you through the new Duotone Slick wing foil wing, and I'll get to my review now. With this wing, there's a few things I noticed out riding it for a couple of weeks now. Number one, I always ride a harness line, as you guys might know. Rather than use like your traditional harness line with a knot and a lark's head and that, like I use on a lot of handled wings, given it had a boom, I thought, you know, it's probably more appropriate to use a windsurf harness line, which is what I've had hooked up here. So I've attached that here, and it just wears less at the boom here with the nylon straps, doesn't eat away at this foam padding as much. And also, you know, it just allows it to lock into the boom a little bit more properly. If you're changing the width on this, I wanted to change the width and kind of figure out where I wanted it while I was on the water. I didn't want to be tying knots and reefing them and really chewing up this boom padding. So the windsurf harness lines are perfect for that. I've got this adjustable one because I wasn't quite sure how long I would want it, but ideally I'd want a single harness line, a fixed harness line, not an adjustable one like this. Just extra weight, extra stuff that can bang around and hit you. But it worked out excellent. I found, you know, about halfway down the boom was my kind of sweet spot for it. You can see here, sort of centered over the stitch line on the 5 anyway. And, you know, maybe 12 inches apart was a really nice spot for me. That was sort of in the sweet spot. And, you know, it's a little narrower than I normally put my harness line attachment points, but it worked really well and balanced out, you know, the power of the wing. You can see in the video here, I even, you know, go no-handed for a long period of time riding. I think my record was something like, you know, a minute or something like that, riding without hands. So it worked excellent, balances the power real nice once you get it seated in there, the right spot. It'll probably change depending on the size you're using, but really comfortable, easy to ride that way. And yeah, get a windsurf harness line on there, you'd be good to go. In terms of my review of the wing, I would say this wing is perfectly suited for anyone who's a new rider, anyone wanting to free ride, anyone progressing through that intermediate stage. They're going to love this wing. I even call it the easy button. Some of my friends when I was describing it, because with the boom, with the balance of the wing, the narrower, more compact wingspan, and just, excuse me, the overall ease of use of this wing is so easy. Your first jibes, your first tacks, it really is quite a bit easier with the boom setup and just the overall design of this wing. That really just makes everything a little bit easier in those basic steps. For advanced level riders, this wing builds speed off apparent wind really well. You know, it doesn't have that necessarily like real oomph grunt right off the get-go when you're pumping or when you're starting in light wind. You know, it requires a little bit more finesse and work, but once it gets moving, especially once you're on foil, it builds apparent wind really quick, so you get a lot of extra wind through the sail. It's very fast flying, good upwind. Because of that apparent wind generation, that speed generation, it works great for jumping, I found, especially in waves where you can really build that board speed and ramp off the wave fast. That really creates a lot of lift in speed and power jumping off the wave. Jumping on flat water, I would say, has maybe a little less lift than something like an NSYS or a F1 Strike. So if you're looking for flat water jumping performance, those might be a little easier to go higher. But in somebody with experienced hands, speed equals jumping height and power. This one really creates a lot of speed as you're flying. So I would say, you know, maybe with some more practice, you could really get some good height on it as well. Because of the speed generation, this one really flies well with smaller foils, I would say. You don't need a massive foil to get this one going, especially if you know what you're doing on the foil. So, you know, it really pairs well with a fast foil and does well with that. In terms of stability, it's adequately stable for surf. I would say it's not going to be as good as a dedicated surf wing, like say maybe a Duotone unit or F1 Swing or some of the more surfy wings out there. But this one, you know, for a casual wave rider is going to be a blast, especially if you're in decent wind, if you're not in straight downwind waves. It works really well. You know, the balance is maybe a little bit rocky, but nothing as bad as the Echo. And for me, it was totally doable. It wasn't a wing you could completely forget about, but it also wasn't rocking and totally unwieldy in your hands where you couldn't control it. You know, just a little bit of babysitting, you can really get it to do a lot for you in the waves. And I did do a lot of testing with that, so that was great to be able to do that. So yeah, great wing for just about anything, especially progressing riders. You know, anybody looking for ease of use, you know, whether you're doing your first board starts, whether you're doing your first jibes and tacks or your first jumps, wave riding, this one's going to kind of do it all fairly well. I wouldn't say it's like bang, pointed at one layer of riding. It's really a versatile wing. It's something that you can jump on in any condition and really enjoy. And I've really enjoyed my time on it thus far. And getting to know it, you find out, you know, kind of the little features that help that. So as I mentioned before, it's got that kind of small leading edge handle here. I think that really helps control some of that rock. You know, it's got a pretty good dihedral in it. It's got some square wingtips. You know, with the boom, it's maybe a little bit heavier than other wings. So you'd expect, you know, maybe it's a little rocky, but with that small handle, it keeps you really connected to what the leading edge is doing. So you can really hold it in place and correct any roll that's happening before it happens. And I think that really, you know, it has a lot to do with the stability it can have if you're monitoring it. In terms of the flying position in the boom, typically I'm not personally a huge fan of booms. You know, they add weight. It's just another thing to carry. They're kind of cumbersome. You know, it's something, if it extends all the way to the trailing edge of the wing, it can stab your board or something. And then obviously if you don't have a center strut, you're removing another layer of inflation that could, you know, help you out if one of your bladders failed. On the Slick, obviously that's not an issue. You have an inflated strut and a boom. It doesn't extend all the way back. Obviously it's a shorter boom, although it's still pretty cumbersome if you're traveling on an airline or something. But I have to say the boom for the Slick is a real selling point for me. It does add a layer of ease of use when you're riding it. You know, I'd say your front hand is pretty well pinned up here, pretty close to the leading edge, rather than being way back here where you got to crawl up to the front to get, you know, into a surf position or to depower. The hinge is really right here, and with that flat leading edge, that has an immediate shut off. You can just push it out away really quick. You don't need to crawl up the wing or really throw out that far. You know, with your hand up here at the hinge, it depowers immediately and really is well balanced off that front hand up here near the Duotone logo. And I find that's really easy to crawl back and forth to flying position to surf position when you're knee starting, you know, from the leading edge, grabbing the boom. It's all really easy to do. And when you're doing jibes and tacks, you know, you have one hand in the boom here. You can grab your other hand anywhere. It's impossible to miss this thing. And even coming overhead blind, you always sort of land in the right position and know where it is, because the boom is in your hand. It's always in a straight line with your hand. You're not searching for a handle or something like that. So it does make it just a little bit easier. I mentioned the valve earlier. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Duotone airport valve. It's not that it doesn't work, it works well, but it has some finicky things about it. When you're twisting it to the left to lock it down before you put the cap on, it's frequent that it'll kind of hiss at you. If it doesn't seat just perfectly on that one-way valve when you shut it off, you know, maybe there's a speck of sand in there or something, it'll kind of hiss at you. And we get a lot of calls about that, like, hey, my wing is leaking. It's not leaking, you just have to secure the cap. The cap is what ties it all down, and I haven't had any issues with these leaking air out the valve with the cap secured. So first thing, if your valve you think it's leaking, blow it out a little bit, turn it to the left. It might still hiss a little bit. Secure the cap. That should take care of the issue. And yeah, so that's just kind of my pet peeve with that valve. it pumps up great, it moves a lot of air, it dumps out well, but we do get a lot of calls about hissing valves because it doesn't always lock down perfectly on that first level of one-way valve. And then, you know, just got to put the cap on, lock it down. It's got an O-ring, it's going to lock everything in there, and you'll be good to go. So that is that with the Duotone Slick Wing. We expect these are going to be hugely popular this year. Before we even have any in stock, we're already selling a ton of these wings. I think it's going to be really popular. If you want one, get in line now, guys, because this wing is probably going to be pretty hard to get all year long. We might have some scattered availability, hopefully. We have a ton of these on order here at the shop, but thus far the demand has been huge. So please be patient with us if you're placing a pre-order. We'll do our best to keep in communication with you on an estimated delivery on these. And fingers crossed, we'll get some big shipments here and we'll have a bunch of stock ready to sell whoever wants one. But as I said, the demand is huge for this wing. So please, you know, keep an eye out and ask if you have any questions about availability. We'd be happy to give you our best estimation, full picture of everything we know, and yeah, give you the scoop for that. This has been Tucker with MattKiteboarding.com. This is the Duotone Slick wing foiling wing and mini boom, and we will see you next time.